clear at this stage. So the basic idea is that with asynchronous programming, when I call a function, I don't wait for the results. I call it and I keep moving. Now, the function has to let me know when it's done. The called function has to let me know when it's done. So we have 3 ways to do it. These 3 ways are more like, you can think of it as a progression or evolution of these asynchronous programming techniques. First, we have one way to do it is using callbacks. The second way of doing it is using promises. And the third way of doing it is using... Okay, so with callbacks, it's quite straightforward, and we will see an example shortly. So you call a function, you pass to it whatever parameters the function needs for it to work. And you feed it, or you give to this function an extra function. What do we call this extra function I give? A callback function. So what does the function do when I call it? It will do its work, and when it's finished, it will call me back. Okay? That conceptually it should be very clear, because we do this all the time with anything that is long running. Okay? So anything that is short and quick, I don't need to do a callback. If I just want to, let's say, order a shake, just like order it and stay there, pick it up and move on. But anything long running, like fixing a car, making a thobe, or anything that's long running, I cannot do that model. It's not wise to do so. I cannot block my whole life and miss out on many things waiting for that long running task to finish. It makes a lot more sense to trigger the task, ask for the service to be done, give a callback number or callback address, move on with our life, and then when the service provider is finished, they will let us know to either come back and collect it, or they will send us the results of what we have asked for. So we do this all the time in the real world, and the programmers also borrow these ideas to the programming platforms that they are using. That's the basic idea. So let me now show you in concrete way, and we step through the evolution. Callbacks, then we move and use promises, then we use async and await. So let me open the examples. So let me explain this concept first. In JavaScript, whenever you want to read from files or get some data from another server through the web, this is already considered as a long-running task, because a reading from the disk or reading from the network is considered long-running relative to doing some simple computation locally on the CPU. So reading from disk, it's considered a long-running. So to read a file from a hard disk, one way to do it is to use a package that comes with Node.js. You don't need to install it. It's already there. It's called FS. So all you do, you require it, you assign it to a variable, and this FS variable will have functions to read and write from files. Okay? All right. So coming from our background, we never seen asynchronous programming, we will tend to do it this way. This is how we are used to do things. So I think, okay, this is an object fs, I will call this function read file and give it the location of the file, and I wait for it, and I expect the file content to contain the content of the file. This is coming from our background, how we do things in the past. But to our surprise, if I run this, it doesn't work. The file content will be undefined. So what's going on here? Why it didn't work? A read and a write, input, output. Any input, output to disk or to the network is considered a long running. So by design, it's not even, you cannot even do it. By design, all the functions that read and write or that involve some input, output are by design synchronous or asynchronous function? by design, they are asynchronous functions. So for example, a read file, is it a synchronous or an asynchronous function?
Asynchronous.
It is an asynchronous function. You cannot call it in a synchronous way. What does it mean, call it in a synchronous way?
Call it in the usual way, like a normal program.
Yes, you call it and wait for its result. You cannot do that. So what is the proper way of calling a read file? Scenario, you have to give it a callback. This is an old technology. This is an old library. It existed even before this idea of promises came along. So this is an asynchronous function that expects what as an input?
Asynchronous.
A callback function. So when you call it, you must pass to it a function to be called back. Okay? Same thing, when you placed your car with the mechanic or gave your car to the mechanic, you gave the mechanic two things. What are these two things you gave the mechanic?
The number to call you back.
The car and the number to call you back. Now, for read file, what are the two things we need to give it for it to work?
File to read.
The path of the file to read and a callback to communicate back to us the content of the file. So a callback is nothing but a function. Now in JavaScript, we are not afraid to basically declare a function on the fly. So I declare here a function. A callback typically has two parameters, an error and data, because two things could happen. Either an error happens or everything goes okay and I get the results in the data. Okay, so what will happen here is I say if error, if there is an error, I will basically do here console.log. This is the error. Otherwise, what I will do, if it is this is not a function, it's just I'm calling it interactively. I will do console.log and basically display that stuff. Display what display the results. In this case, data. Okay, so this is how I call an asynchronous function. I pass it the parameter that it expects, and I pass it an extra function. This function typically has two parameters, error and data. If there is an error, it will be placed in the first parameter called error, and if everything goes fine, what the result of this read, which will be the content of the file, will be placed in the data variable. Now, if I run this, okay, this is the data that I actually had inside the file. Okay, so let's do one further step. I want to make this as a function. This whole process, I want to make it as a function. So let's say I have a function called getStudents. Okay, so I have a function called getStudents. Now, have a look at this. Inside this function, I will be calling read file. Yes? Inside this function, I'll be calling read file. Guess what? If you create a function, and inside that function, you call an asynchronous function, the function that you are writing becomes asynchronous. Okay? If you depend on an asynchronous function, your function becomes asynchronous immediately. Okay? Which means if somebody calls your function, which is the get student, what they have to give you? They have to give you a callback function. Okay? So this is automatic, like just take it mechanically. If you have a function and inside it you call an asynchronous function, your function itself becomes asynchronous. So in this case, if somebody calls getStudents, what are we supposed to? When I call getStudents, I'm supposed to give it as a parameter a callback function. Okay, so So basically, let me call this callback function that I will give, let me call it CB, or I can call it whatever I wish. Okay. Now, if something goes wrong, all I do, I call back the callback function and give it the error. If everything goes fine, I call back the callback function. There is no error, which means the error is null, and I give it the data that has been produced. So let me call this function getStudent. This function takes, because it is an asynchronous function, it takes as an input another function. I have to give it a callback function. So in here, the callback function will be a function that takes two parameters, error and data. Okay. And basically is the same, exactly the same code here. If something goes wrong, I will do console.log. No. And let me explain it. Don't worry. If everything, I can rename this if I wish to make it more meaningful. I can rename it to students if I wish. I will just run it first and I will explain. Why is the getStudent an asynchronous function? Because it uses an asynchronous function. As soon as you use an asynchronous function, you are also asynchronous. So as soon as you put your car in the mechanic and you are waiting for it, if your friend asks you, please, can I use your car to go to place XYZ, will you be able to give him the car? You cannot do it. You cannot give the car because you don't have it. You are waiting for your car, so the requester of your car also must wait. Okay? You tell them, give me your number. When I get a call from the mechanic, I will call you to give you the car. Okay, why you are not able to give them the car immediately? Because you are waiting also. So because you are waiting, you pass that waiting to whoever is requesting the car. You get the idea?
Yeah.
So in here, I have this getStudents. Because I'm using a read file which is asynchronous inside the implementation of getStudents, khalas, I can no longer call the getStudent synchronously. I have to call it asynchronously and pass a callback function. Okay? The callback function, always I put the error first and the data that I expect second. Not because we are, as developers, we are kind of pessimistic, but just not to forget about the error handling. So that's why, by design, JavaScript developers, they always put the error first, followed by the data expected back from the function. Is it clear? Okay. So let me show you one more example. Let me run it first, just to show you everything is working. Okay, let me make it a little bit more interesting now. I want to get for one particular student, not for all students. Okay, so I will change this one. Instead of getStudent, I will call it getStudent. Okay. Now, what parameters I expect here?
Student ID.
Student ID, thank you very much. So it takes two parameters. One is the student ID, and the second parameter is a callback function. Now, when I get the data, let me just cut this one. I can put here data equal. No problem, I can do this, or I can just, maybe if you want, I can do it properly this way. Okay, now I get all the students, and I have to filter for one of them, where the student's ID equal to whatever the student have sent, whatever the parameter might be. So what I will do here, I will say let student equals students dot find, I'll go through every student and I will return the student where the student ID equals this student ID. Okay, and then I will return this one. Because I am not changing these, it will be recommended to just declare them as constant. So if I change them by mistake or accidentally, I will get an error. Okay, so now if I want to call this function, I have to pass it one of the students. So let's take this one. So I pass the parameter and I pass the callback. And here, let me just to make it more clear, because I'm expecting only one, I will rename it to student. Okay, so now if I run this, I'll get one student, this particular student, and only this student. Is clear so far? So now it becomes more interesting that my get student is doing more computation than just reading from the file. It makes more sense to make it as a function, an asynchronous function, and call it. Now, have a look as this CVE. This CVE is not very clear. What does it mean, CVE? Maybe. So I want to know more, what is this CVE? So I want to do another file read. In this case, I will give it this program code. That is a program code. And I get back the program name. Civil engineering or mechanical, I don't know what this CVE is. Okay, so let us do another function. Super quick this time. It will be similar to this, just to save time. Let me just, if you don't mind, I'll copy this. So I'll make this one get program, for example. So what I'm doing, it's a get program. It takes the program code, for example, CS, it will return me computer science, CE, computer engineering, CVE, civil engineering maybe, okay? So this is how I do it. I read all the programs, and then I find the program where the code is equal to the program code parameter, and return the name. Yes? Excellent. Okay, now what I want to do, yes, maybe in here. I want to do it here. Before I return the student, are you following? Before I return the student, I will change the program from CVE to CVE dash the name of the program. Are you following? No, yes? So let me explain the goal of this exercise. What is the goal of this exercise? Is to give more meaning to the program. So program CVE, instead of CVE, I want it to be CVE dash civil engineering. Okay? So can I do something like this? Const program name equals get program, and I say here student dot program. Yes? Can I do something like this to get the program name?
But you need to call function.
Yes?
You need to call function.
Can I do this? Definitely I cannot do this because this is asynchronous. So for me to call an asynchronous function, I must do this way. I must call the function and then pass another function as a callback. So in here, same thing, error and data, and then if everything, let's ignore the error. You know what to do if there is an error. Let's just assume hopefully everything will go fine. I will get here the program name. If everything goes okay, I will get the program name. And then what I will do with the program name, I will do here dot program equals not the best way. Let me do it more proper way. This is the strong literal that we've seen before, if you remember. So I put this here. So the program name will be the existing program name plus, sorry, the program code plus dash the program name, okay? And then when everything is fine, I'll make the callback here. Let's give it a try. So from a function, I'm calling another function. Asynchronously, when everything goes fine, then I will return the callback by calling back the function. Yes? Okay, so let's give it a try. You see here, it all worked, and instead of getting CVE, I'm getting CVE-civil engineering. Okay? So you can see here, as I start calling more and more functions, my program will be basically growing in complexity when I have a nested asynchronous calls. And if I keep doing this, we will end up with what is known as a callback hell. Basically, my program keeps on growing like a pyramid, something like this. It grows not only vertically. Programs, usually the ones you have done so far, they just grow vertically. You add more lines. But my program will also grow horizontally because of these callbacks. I will have callbacks within callbacks and makes it so complicated. So this is known in the JavaScript community as a callback hell, like nested callbacks. Makes the understanding of the program much harder. So instead of doing this, instead of using callbacks, there is another better way of doing asynchronous programming using what is known as a promise. First of all, is callback clear? You understand it? Okay. So in a simple way, you call a function, you don't wait for it. You call it, give it the parameters it needs to work, and give it one extra parameter, which is a function. This function takes two parameters, error and data. If everything goes fine, you get if something goes wrong, you get an error. Otherwise, you get the results of the function. Yeah, it works very nicely, no problem. It is super cool, but it becomes more complex when you have a nested functions that call each other asynchronously. You will end up with what is known as a callback hell. And to reduce this callback hell, the JavaScript developers, they invented a new way of doing asynchronous programming, which is a promise. Okay, so let's now redo it. So first of all, the FS library is a callback-based library. I cannot use promises with it, unless if I want to convert it myself to use promises. I don't want to do that, not to confuse you too much, but what I want to do is to use a more recent, more advanced library that uses promises. And this advanced library called FS Extra. So it's a library that does not come with Node when you install it. You have to do npm install FS Extra. The good news, it has the same exact interface, which means the same methods. But these methods, instead of expecting a callback, they give you back a promise. And I'll show you what this means very shortly. So instead of using FS, I will be using FS Extra, which is a promise-based library instead of callback-based library. Okay. So a promise, like promises we have in the real world, it's something that will be hopefully realized and be achieved and delivered in the future. Okay, so basically the mechanic, they will tell you, okay, I promise that I'll bring you back the car by this time. And then when your friend comes, you say, I the mechanic promised me they will give me the car back at 10. I will promise you to give it to you at 10:30. Okay? So that's how you start thinking about the whole programming, is that a function, when it returns, it does not return you the actual result. What it returns to you? A promise. So in the future, that promise will be fulfilled, hopefully. Or it could be rejected. The mechanic might call you and say, your car needs a much deeper fix, the engine has to change. So what you will do, you will basically raise an exception to your friend to say, I will not be able to fulfill my promise. So the promise could be either fulfilled or it could be rejected or broken. Okay, so enough theory, let's see exactly how it works. So now if I say something like fs.readLine, read file, sorry, and I give it a parameter which is data.student.json. Okay? And let me store this one here. Let result equal this. Now, if I do console.log result, what do you think I will get? You see here, it is giving me a promise that is pending. Okay? So promise is some object in JavaScript. It is a class that you can instantiate and return. Okay? So when I call this function, it's giving me back a promise. What should I do with this promise? Of course, I can return it. I can do lots of things with it. But what I can do with it, one thing I can do with it, I can basically wait on it, wait for that promise to be fulfilled. When it's fulfilled, I want this function to be called. I will get back I will explain this shortly. And here I will do console.log and output the data. Okay, so one way I can use the promise is I can kind of wait for it to be fulfilled. When it is fulfilled, I will get the data objects and I do whatever I want to do with it. Don't let this arrow function confuse you. You can make it as a function. You can make it like this, if you wish. Okay? You can make it this way, this old syntax, or you can make it a more elegant syntax using the arrow function. It is exactly the same. Yep. So let me do here console.log, log my data. Yep. Okay, so let me run it. And I will get, I need to do JSON. JSON.parse. Yes, thank you. JSON.parse. Is clear so far? Okay, so now let's wrap this into a function to return one student. Same thing we did before. Let's take a parameter here, student ID. Okay. Let me here do return. Wait for it to be fulfilled. Once it is fulfilled, of course, I will get here the data. And then what I do is I do here const students equal this thing, parsing the data that I got. And then I will basically do here return students.find. I'll go through each student and return the one where student ID equal this one. Okay, that's one way of doing it. So in here, when I am done, I will get the student, and I will display it. In here, I'll pass one of the parameters. So let me just pick up one of the students. Let's take this one. Okay. Come here. I'll pass. See here, it's fine, working okay. So if something goes wrong, I can do here a dot catch. And the dot catch is also a function. It takes an error, and then I'll do here console.log. I'll display the error. So for example, let's say something goes wrong here. I put the wrong file, run it. I'll get this error. Okay? Is clear? Okay. So just to summarize quickly, so my function now does not take any callback function. What it does, it will do its work and returns a promise. A promise is a future value that will be hopefully fulfilled in the future, or it could be rejected. Now, when I call the function, I provide two functions to it. One, I pass it with the then function. So the then is a function that takes another function. Okay. So in here, this is to handle the happy day scenario where everything works fine. If everything works fine, then will be called, and I will get the data that is returned by the get student. If something goes wrong, the catch will be called, and the error will be given to the catch, and I'm displaying it here. Okay, so I will do exactly the same for, if you remember, for the program. Yes? So this one will be program code. This one is get program. Yes. This is for CNG programs. And this one will be the code equals to the program code. These will be programs. I'll read all the programs and find the one I'm interested in. I'm not returning everything. I'm just returning the name. Yes? Is okay so far? Okay. So what I can do here, just to show you. So one thing I can do here, let's say I declare a variable here called let student. Okay. This one gives me a particular student. I will store it just to show you one way of doing these things. I will store the student that was returned from the first function. So the first function, when I call it, it returns me a student object. Okay, I will explain this shortly. After I get the student, I do another call, which is get the program of the student. So what I will do here, return another promise, which is this one. Get program student dot program, and then I will do another then here. Get back. I will explain this shortly. Program name. Then if there is any problem, I will catch it. So here the student will be the student.program. Sorry, this one's supposed to be program. Plus equals. Yes, dash, and then the program name that I have received. Okay, at the end of this, I will, if I do console.log, I will get the student with the full name of the program. Let me explain this, what's going on here. In here, this is my first function. It is returning me a promise, which is a future value. This is another function. It returns me a promise. This promises me to give me a student object. This promises me to give me the program name. I give it the code, it promises me to the program name. Okay, now, here, because I need this object, student, inside this other function, I have to declare it outside. If I declare it inside here, it's only visible in this area. Okay? So what I'm doing here, I'm calling this function. If everything goes okay, the then will be called. What I get back at my hand? A student object. I store it, and then I return another promise, which means I am doing another asynchronous call. So I do another promise. This is called basically promise chaining. One promise, chain it with another promise, and so on. So instead of my program growing horizontally like this, it is now back to growing vertically. Yes? So, which makes it much easier. So I return another promise, wait for it to be fulfilled using then. When it is fulfilled, I get the program name, I assign it to my students and display everything. If anything goes wrong in any of these, either here or here, I have only one catch to catch all of them. So the catch, I can be chaining so many asynchronous functions with then. When the first one fulfilled, I return another promise. When it's fulfilled, I return another promise, and so on. And I can connect them using then. And then at the end, I do one catch to catch any error in any of this chain. That's basically the idea of promises. So I hope it's a bit clearer. Now, async and await is just brings this and instead of using then, it makes it a bit easier.